I guess I'm hosting this. I mean, it's hosting on my Substack, probably.
Yeah.
Hi, Darren.
Hi, John.
This is the True Detective podcast, right?
Yes. Yes.
for the 30 people that listened to you and me breaking down how absurd season 2 of True Detective was.
I saw Jodie Foster win the Best Actor Award for True Detective Alaska.
I haven't watched.
At
Are
the
you
Golden
still
Globes.
watching it?
I did watch that. I did watch that entire series, actually. For those that are wondering why this is beginning here, John and I, a million years ago, did a podcast back when podcasts were very rare and
Just
new,
like this, audio only.
about True Detective Season 2.
Yeah.
But I have watched every season of True Detective, hoping that it will return to form. And we watched the one from Alaska. And while watching the Golden Globes on Sunday night, Jodie Foster, who was the lead, won the Best Actor for her performance in True Detective.
I had a funny moment, and we'll get off TV in a second. I had a funny moment where I've been watching this show called Landman with Billy Bob Thornton. Billy Bob Thornton, John Hamm, Demi Moore, and I think there's some other star in it that I'm not thinking of. And you hear that, and you're like, wow, all-star cast, right? We started watching it, and we're like, this show is 90% Billy Bob Thornton, 8% his family, like the people playing his wife and his daughter, and like 2%, like 1.5% John Hamm and 0.5% Demi Moore. And every time I Google this, because like literally you go through like 6 episodes, you never see Demi Moore. And I Googled, like, is she in this show? Did I get this wrong? And every article you read is like, wow, they barely use John Hamm and Demi Moore. Why didn't they use them more? This is upsetting, blah, blah, blah. And I saw a thing this morning that said Demi Moore wins a Golden Globe. And I'm like, she won a Golden Globe. She was on screen for 12 minutes. And then I was like, oh no, something else where she was like the starring. I was like, oh, thank God. I would have been furious if they gave an award to someone who was in like 12 minutes of a season of a show. It was enraging me for just a second.
See, I hadn't heard of the show that Demi Moore won for.
Me neither.
But I saw her speech.
I saw a clip of it. She was like a drug addict or something.
I don't know the show. I mean,
Yeah.
You could put $1 million on this table and I couldn't tell you what it was.
Sure.
But I did see her speech. Actually, her speech sort of resonated with me and where I am in my career.
Oh, cool. Transition point.
Right. Which is, she made mention of the fact that some producer told her like 20 years ago that she was a, quote, popcorn actor, meaning that she could make some money. She could be in some box office films that are going to do well. They're going to perform well. But she was never going to do anything of recognition.
Never going to be a serious actress.
She was never going to do anything that would lead to her winning a Golden Globe or any other type of award. Outside of like a Razzie or one of those, types of goofy things that you see on the internet.
I disagree with that guy.
But that's what she was told. And, so it was important for her. It was significant for her to win this Golden Globe for whichever performance it was. Again, I don't really know. But it was important for her because, she really thought like, maybe that's all I'm ever going to be. Maybe all I'm ever going to be in life is this, quote, popcorn actor where I just do things and, hey, it's a nice life and I'm on the cover of magazines and, I'm popular and people know who I am, blah, blah, blah. But, I make good money and I can live a good life and I can travel. I could do all this sort of stuff. But, I'm never going to do anything of any significance. And I was like, that's something to think about, isn't it?
Sounds like
right.
It's funny. So the other day I was talking to my wife, Rebecca, and she mentioned you came up in conversation and she was like, I want to pay Darren a compliment. And I was like, okay. And she was like, every time I see Darren, even if we're in a group, he makes it a point to come up and ask me some questions and show interest in my interest. And I was like, yeah, he's a host. That's what he does. And she was like, oh, yeah, like it hadn't occurred to her that those were the same talent. And I was like, yeah, he's interviewing you. He interviews everyone. That's what he does. And she was like, oh. And like, it was one of those things where it's like, take you outside of a radio studio and like the skills and talent just, it wasn't as easy to spot for her. But I was like, yeah, Darren can do anything probably as long as you're in front of a microphone and talking.
Well, and I would even say to extend that back further, since, obviously being a radio host is probably the only reason why anybody would even care what I have to say on this platform or any other platform. That probably started when I was bartending. That's really where that started was getting to know people, getting people engaged because you want them to stay longer and longer, obviously, so that they have more and more drinks and spend more and more money and tip more and more.
Yeah.
So,
give you bigger tips.
I would say a lot
more.
of the compliments that I receive for my media profession is rooted in bartending. No joke. Like, they sort of went hand in glove when I was in college learning how to do all of this stuff. That's kind of where the discipline began.
That's the old Bill Simmons thing, right? Where Bill Simmons said he was a bartender in college, and he was like, my advice to everyone, especially men, is bartend in college.
Yes.
He's like, you will learn so much about how to talk to people, how to start a conversation, how to keep one going, all of that, like invaluable social skills. I never got to bartend, but I guess I still have time.
And it's good for your social life.
Yeah.
To be honest, I mean, it's good for your sex life. I mean, you're more attractive. It is a fact, John, that you're more attractive when you're 3-4 inches taller behind the bar, in control of the booze.
Oh yeah,
like that is a non-negotiable fact of life.
That's an instinctual thing. This
Yes.
person is in control. I am not. Therefore, they are attractive to me.
They are taller. They are looking. The whole setup there is to just create.
That's
this illusion. It's not an illusion, I suppose, but
no. I know what you're saying.
To create the framework of, yes, like this person. This is an important person.
Someone told me this, someone that would know told me this a really long time ago. My wife's definitely going to listen to this podcast, so I can't do this anymore. And they told me if you ever wanted to win an argument with somebody, if they were sitting down, find a way to stand up. So like if you are above them, they are looking up at you and you are looking down at them, instinctually, you will be able to convince them of your viewpoint. Unless it's just like egregious, right? But if it's like close, like you're arguing something that's close, just find a way to stand up while they're sitting down and you'll win. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, statistically, like tall people aren't tall people,
more convincing,
statistically, like more like heads of Fortune 500 companies and things like that. I think that's accurate.
That's probably true. I always pay attention to the Tom Brady one where it's like CEOs and successful people have more symmetrical faces because I have a very asymmetrical face and it drives me crazy. This is the shit that unemployed people talk about, by the way.
Yeah, this is unemployment media talk.
Yeah,
right here.
It's 11 a.m. on a Monday. We're sitting in my backyard, the former Padres hot tub studio. We're sitting.
Is this where the action was?
Well,
right
it was at the old house, and then it was here for a little while, and then I had to leave. But now we're doing this, me and you, and maybe me and other people in the future, because this is fun. But we spent a lot of our time talking about our thoughts on sports media, where it is, where it was, where it's headed. And I don't think we need to be specific about San Diego sports media, although I suppose we can. But I wanted to start by talking about present and future sports media. And I sent you an article yesterday that it was Sunday. You were probably doing more interesting things. You probably didn't have a chance to read it. But it was about newspapers and how newspapers are basically bending over backwards for Donald Trump. And the guy writing it, I think it's Hamilton Nolan, was pointing out that newspapers used to be these institutions that were, hey, it's our job to provide the news to the people to make an informed public that can, vote and engage with society. And over time, they've been vacuumed up by investment firms that only care about staying in business and making money. And so, of course, they're going to bend over backwards for Trump, because if they don't, Trump is going to make it very difficult for them to A, exist, B, cover him, which he's going to be a top story probably for 4 years. That's hard for them. And this is why people like Jeff Bezos, owner of the Washington Post, is bending over backwards for him. Not to mention the fact that anything Trump does with regulations is going to affect his other product, Amazon. It's why Mark Zuckerberg is lining up with Facebook and Meta and being like, here, have $1 million. Just don't regulate our social media, like without calling me first and asking me if you can. And newspapers are now a part of that, and media is now a part of that. And I went through this at Yahoo. I'm not going to speak too negatively about Yahoo because they gave me a severance payment, and I don't want them asking for that money back.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
But Yahoo before I even got there, Yahoo got purchased by an investment firm. While I was there, the investment firm handed the keys of the operation over to someone whose job it was to make more money for the company. And when I started there, it was the money guys are over here. They let us do our own thing, right? And they were actually more focused on like Yahoo Finance, and they still own the Huffington Post and all this stuff. He's like, they're not really focused on Yahoo Sports. And then we got a CEO of Yahoo Sports who was focused on us. And he was like, we're going to make this profitable. And I didn't care for the direction that the business took because everything was what people have gotten sick and tired of with ESPN and a lot of sports radio, which is especially national sports radio. Talk about LeBron, talk about the Dallas Cowboys, talk about the Lakers, talk about these 5 topics that it says, hey, when we talk about these things, people get outraged or people defend. The comments go crazy.
People have opinions.
Right. And it's like the sports media started as the sports section of a newspaper, right? And because of that, I always view it in the same frame I view newspapers. It's like, it's the job of the sports section to deliver news and explain through analysis. And they're not doing any of that anymore. They don't do any of that anymore. They just go, what topic gets big numbers? We're going to find a way to talk about this. And that has almost ruined sports media. The fact that professional sports teams have launched their own media companies where they can steal people and be like, hey, you were, this happened with the Cowboys hire like every single person that like the Dallas Morning News or the Fort Worth paper, like from their sports section, let go, immediately hired by the Dallas Cowboys or the Dallas Mavericks. And then you're like, okay, here's this guy. He's got this respectable name. He built this reputation, but also the team literally signs his paychecks. This isn't a thing where it's like, oh, he's worried about the team's going to be mad at him. Like, they'll just fire him. And that has ruined sports media. And, we were talking earlier, and this is a really important point that I'm going to take the time to say right here. And when I worked at 1090 with you, I made this point to the bosses. Sports radio is now competing with sports podcasts. Period. End of sentence there, right? I don't turn on sports radio in my car very often because when I get in, it automatically connects and it starts playing the podcast I was listening to previously, which used to be, I'd get in and my car would be tuned to the radio and I'd listen to whatever was on the radio at that time. Now it's podcasts or Spotify if I'm listening to music. And there's no commercials on either of those. So the times I do turn into sports radio outside of Padre games, I'm like, oh, okay, this is a good couple minutes of, oh, they went to commercial. It's like, all right, my car ride is done now. I caught 2 minutes of content and 8 minutes of commercial. This is a bad experience comparing to podcasts.
It's funny, you say that because, so John lives in Carlsbad. We couldn't be further apart, by the way. I live in Imperial Beach. So, the distance between when I sent John a note this morning about getting together and chopping it up a little bit, I looked on the Maps app and it was 55 minutes, somewhere in that range, right? Yeah. So I was like, oh, okay, 55 minutes. My brain immediately went to what podcast can I listen to
for an hour
while I'm driving back and forth. And my wife said something to the effect of, oh, wow, that's quite a distance. So I said, oh yeah, like it's fine. I'm driving up and down the coast on the 5 freeway and I get to listen to a couple of podcasts.
Right.
It works.
There are worse ways to spend your time.
It works for me. But because I got in the car early, I don't have a ton of exposure to Ben and Woods, right? 2 guys that you and I know pretty well. So, I didn't have a ton of exposure to them, but it was about 9:15-ish, 9:20-ish, somewhere in that range. And I said, hey, let me take the opportunity to listen to a few minutes. I follow them on social media, so I know it's their first show back, 2025. I'm with you. Sports radio, at least when I got into it, we always felt like it's up to us to set the agenda, right? We wanted the newspaper to sort of lose that relevancy. I always said one of the goals of our show specifically was we want to set the sports agenda for the day, us being the show that I always worked on. So, I think Ben and Woods probably have that title as much as anybody in this market currently.
Especially as a morning show.
Sure. And it's funny you talk about commercials because I got in the car and, I have to take Imperial Beach Boulevard pretty much from the coast all the way to the 5 freeway. Anybody that's familiar with that road knows, it's probably only about 3.5 miles, but there's a bunch of stoplights and they're doing construction. So, it's a little more time consuming than it should be and it's aggravating, but whatever. And I got in the car and I drove down the road and, it was a commercial. And I think Woods was doing a spot for forgive me for not remembering which gambling site it was, Underdog Fantasy or something like that.
Oh, I didn't even know they did that. Yeah, that's how much I don't listen.
Everybody does it now. I mean,
See,
if you're going to be in that business, you have to, you almost have to do some sort of sports gambling advertising. Anyway, I put gas in my car. I got back in the car. I drove, and the segment hadn't started. And I was like, man, that was hey, good on them. That means they're probably billing a lot, which is what it's all about. To your point, yeah, right? No, this is like a long walk around the block to say that's a billing thing. Like I can go back to 1090 and I can remember, having a bunch of, what we call live ad libs. And we had so many live ad libs at one point that I was like, hey, we're jamming 2 of these live spots into the same commercial break.
Can't take a piss break.
I can't even go to the bathroom. Yeah. And I remember my boss being like, yeah, but you're making money. You're getting paid for doing all this sort of stuff. I'm like, yeah, but I can't even catch my breath during the freaking commercial break because I'm doing 2 different live commercials during, a 6, 7, 8 minute commercial. So anyway, and I just, since I've not been on 760, I'm like you. I listen to way more podcasts now. And it was.
Do you fast forward through the ads?
Yeah. If there are ads. But I listen to, my favorite podcasts are ad free. Like I pay to subscribe to podcasts that don't give me the advertising. But the Guardian Football Weekly is an English football soccer podcast. They have spots. I will fast forward through those. The Daily, right? The New York Times, the Daily, they usually have some, I'll hit the 30 seconds fast forward or the 15-second fast forward, depending on what it is. And there's other podcasts I'm sure that people are familiar with where you do that sort of thing as well. I mean, even our show, when we would upload it either at 1090 or 760 or 1360 or whatever, even those shows that we would upload probably came with some sort of, pre-banner, what you call it in the industry. Pre-roll. And, you'd sort of, I'm sure people fast forwarded through that as well. But it was sort of a jolt to the system to be like, wow, that's a long commercial break, man. And, not everybody's going to, now I also, because, I don't want this to sound like criticism, right? But I will say, once they finally, once they got their segment going, it was a good segment. And I think it would be justified to sit through that to wait for their segment.
Every sports radio show,
but not every show's like that.
But every sports radio show would be better as a sports podcast. It would be a better listening experience as a sports podcast. And this is like what I always compare podcasts and sports radio to newspaper and blogs. And I'm like, the thing about blogs was that you didn't have to wait for the next day for the reaction to the news, right? You didn't have to wait for the paper to be printed. And that's why blogs eventually went out over over newspapers. The thing about sports podcasts is same thing. News breaks, in the afternoon, unless it's real big and they're pulling Ben and Woods into the studio, which I know they've done before. You're not getting their thoughts except on Twitter, which is it's just a side thing, or you're waiting until the next morning. Whereas with a podcast, boom, here's your emergency podcast. There's no ads on it, right? Or there's ads in the beginning. There's ads. My buddy Kirk and Josh, they do a Dallas Mavericks podcast that I listen to, especially when I don't get to watch the game because they do a lot of X's and O's breakdown, which I'm a nerd, so I love that shit. And they have a pre-roll ad. I'm assuming they have a post-roll ad. I don't know. I never make it to the end because they're always like, all right, that's the end of the podcast. And I just hit stop, move on to the next one. I don't wait for the post-roll. And then they do an ad break in the middle of the show that I think is 2 minutes long. But every time I get to it, I just fast forward. There's Kirk's voice. And if I had to listen to, instead of listening to an hour of them breaking down the game with a 2-minute ad break in the middle, it was here's 6 minutes of content or 8 minutes of content and then 4 minutes of ads and 8 minutes of content and 4 minutes of ads. I would just go find something else.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, and radio, like I said, just using, this morning commute as an example, but, it could apply to all of it is, it's not 2 minutes, it's a long time. And, this is a little trick that I'm sure most people are aware of, embedded into that time between actual segments are other clever ways to advertise, like traffic. Now, I don't necessarily need to listen to traffic. I have an app, and if I'm going anywhere of significance, I will check the app. before I go and remember whatever time it is that they're going to. But, traffic is usually brought to you by such and such a thing, right? So, you also embed into those breaks some other less, more subtle ways of advertising. But, back to where you started about being in the corporate world, I'll use my former employer as an example. iHeart is a publicly traded company. So, they're reliant on that revenue coming in. They have to produce a certain level of revenue to offset what it is that you're paying people to work there. And so from that standpoint, you are answering to your shareholders, and your primary focus is on the monetization and the profitability of what it is that you're putting out there more than it is the quality, right? So, I just became a bit of a math problem for iHeart, and it wasn't performance based. Although I would grant you, and I'm open enough to admit it, I don't know that we were doing the best product. We didn't put out the best product for the last couple of years, and there were some reasons for that. There were some reasons for that were behind the scenes that probably will remain behind the scenes, at least for today. Some challenges that we were faced with, some decisions that were made internally that again, it sounds like I'm making excuses. I think
I actually don't know what any of these things are, but do you want me to tell you, as a listener of the show, what I thought you guys lost?
Sure.
Jordan.
Yeah, I think that was a big deal.
You, Jordan, and Marty was a thing.
Yeah.
Right? And especially when, like, each one of you was representing a neighborhood, right?
Right, yeah.
Marty represented PB, and you represented North Park. And
he was in Point Loma.
He was in Point Loma, and you guys would argue over which one was better and all of that. And, he could talk soccer with you. Marty could talk football with you. They would both jump in on a baseball conversation. And it's just, when you have a group, especially a group that's small, of 3 people who are together for years and years and years, you sub one out and you replace them, it's going to be different.
Yeah, it was.
And I don't necessarily know if it was better or worse, but it was definitely different.
It was. I mean, I think Jordan not coming with us, and listen, Jordan 100% validated his decision.
Oh, he's doing great
begged
stuff.
him. I begged him to give it a year.
Yeah.
Come with us for a year.
No, he made the right call.
And yeah, absolutely. I mean, Jordan's now married, 2 children. He's got a great job working for MLB The Show.
And married with 2 children, has a great job. And every time I talk to that man, every time I send him a text, hey, let's grab lunch or whatever, golfing right now, I'll get back to you. Man must golf.
Not just golfing in Hawaii.
Did the golfing in Hawaii.
That man spends more time in Hawaii than the governor of Hawaii. It's, he's got an amazing life, and I couldn't be prouder of Jordan.
Yeah.
I really couldn't, that Jordan as a 19-year-old came through our show, and that station introduced him to his wife and gave him the opportunities that are the building blocks, the foundation of his life today. Like, I couldn't be happier as a friend. I consider Jordan a friend, Jordan and Sierra. I couldn't be prouder as somebody who thought he recognized something in him. But it's all on him. Like, he did the
work.
It would have been easy to just come with us to iHeart. He did the hard thing. Even in hindsight, if it doesn't seem like it's the hard thing, it was the hard thing.
He did the uncomfortable thing.
He did the uncomfortable thing. He bet on himself.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a really important lesson in all of that. But I think you're right. I mean, I think that, and I don't want to, sound like I'm being critical of former colleague Jim Russell. I'm still a big fan of Jim's. Jim got married this last year. Lee and I went to his wedding. I think he's really making a name for himself. He's got his own show now. I think he's a pretty clever guy, and he's found his lane. And Jonathan was a guy that came aboard late, but the show was just different. And I think you're right. I think we had that. We were all so compatible, even when we weren't compatible. We didn't have to ask Jordan to do anything. He did it.
Yeah.
By the time I got there, Jordan already had 10 ideas. And, that was, it was really a luxury. But, there was other stuff that happened over the last couple of years, just decisions that were made internally that I don't know how interested the, people listening would be in that. And, an example is we had a program director who left, and, his name was Brian Long, and, he was mostly responsible for me choosing to go to iHeart in the first place. The 3 people who were most responsible for me going to iHeart all left the company. And, when that sort of stuff happens, again, I know it sort of sounds like an excuse. Like, what does that have to do with the quality of the program between 12 and 3 o'clock every day?
It matters.
It does, and it does a lot because, you start thinking, well, where is this all going? And it's just, I think, the ambitions changed. I think, ambitions weren't properly aligned. I think, I also think I'm very hypersensitive, and, John can tell you this through private conversations. If you're active on Padres social media, you know the name Corey Stewart, like, even former colleagues have been like, I've always been really, really hypersensitive to not wanting to stick around too long, and
we used to go out and get beers after 1090 all the time. And you would say the same thing every time. I just don't want to turn into one of these dinosaurs.
I just didn't want to be, Hacksaw. I didn't want to be Coach.
I
don't want to be somebody. And, I don't even know that this is going to be a criticism. I just don't want to be somebody, who's, just wants to work in radio and only wants to work in radio.
Yeah.
I know people are doing their own things now, and good for them. I wish them nothing but success. I really don't wish ill on almost anybody. But, I look and I go, gosh, like I know how often those guys would contact local radio stations, at the first sign of trouble and be like, hey, I can solve your problems. Oh, really? How can you do that? Hire me, so
I remember the day.
And I never wanted to be the joke. Like, I never wanted to be the guy, that like, it was like you were the butt of the joke, and maybe people, didn't realize it and all that sort of stuff. So, like, I think it was just a combination of a bunch of things where, the writing was on the wall. I think what I'm trying to say is, like, I wasn't blindsided by iHeart's decision to take me off.
Yeah.
The day of their choosing was not exactly what I was expecting, but, that's their deal.
The day that Yahoo laid me off, I literally said to my wife, I got job security through the NBA playoffs. I'm certain of that. But I was also almost every day telling my wife, I want to quit this job. I want to quit this job. I wish I could quit this job. And as my therapist told me the other day, they did the hard work for you and then handed you money so you could survive it.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. He's like, they quit the job for you. And he's like, and the reason you couldn't quit was because you were worried about the money. And they were like, you're gone. Here's some money. Make it easier.
Yeah, I mean, and again, that's the sort of thing that you and I can say here, and I can honestly say the same thing.
Yeah,
that I would go home and I would talk to Leah about, like, this feels like it has run its course.
Yeah,
and
you kind of know.
Some will say, well, these are two unemployed dudes sitting in a backyard, but I think that you sort of just recognize, I don't know. I don't see where this is going. Like I said about ambitions, our ambitions became less about radio and quality of programming, and more about, how do we, they're big on like influencers, like they want you to at iHeart be like an influencer type. And I just don't know that exactly. And there's a lot of people that are doing it and doing it well. I just don't think I didn't recognize the destination from when I walked through the doors the first time to where it was towards the tail end of it.
Media?
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Media has never been, probably will never be, hopefully, a one-size-fits-all model. Not every show is the same. Not every host is the same. Not everyone needs to be an influencer. Not everyone could pull off being an influencer if they tried. And that was kind of what bothered me about what was happening at Yahoo, was that it was pushing everyone to do the same thing, because it was like, well, we looked at the box over here and it spit out numbers that everyone should do this. I'm like, no, not everyone should be doing the same thing. That's kind of the point. We need diversity of content. Speaking of,
it's funny, real quick. Do you mind? That's how we got the reputation that we got about a show that didn't take phone calls. Is I always remember when we were at 1090, we had a former colleague of ours who said to me once, we were at some sort of social event. He goes, listen, like, they're all kind of the same shows, aren't they? One show starts at 6, one show starts at 10, one show starts at 2. Like, it's all sort of the same thing, isn't it?
And they all take calls.
And I remember thinking that day, I don't want to do that. It's like a baseball lineup.
Yeah.
Like it's pretty easy to game plan for a lineup where you have a bunch of dudes with the same skill set, right? Yeah. Like, you want a guy who's got a little bit of contact, and Padres of 2024, great example. Those dudes all did some different things.
Yeah.
And like it was a really good lineup. And I always viewed it that way through the lens of sports. So anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, you're good.
But like, that's why I wanted to do a different show. It's like, I didn't want to sound like the show before us. I didn't want to show like the show after us.
Right. And at the end of the day, when we would go out for drinks, we would talk about, the direction sports media was going and all of that. But B, and your future and how you didn't want to be a dinosaur. But I remember almost every time you giving me the same pitch, which is why does San Diego not have left-wing radio, right? Plenty of right-wing radio in San Diego. Why isn't there left-wing radio? And it was obvious that you are the type of person, I consider myself to be this type of person as well, whether or not that's true is irrelevant, that has more than just one interest. And as I said to my wife, with you at a party or at a bar or something like that, you can do this about anything that's interesting to you. You can do this about food. You can do this about politics. You can do this about sports. Why should you be limited to just talk about sports, right? You always wanted to do more, and I always wanted to do more. And at the end of the day, maybe sports media, corporate sports media with the answering to the shareholders are never going to be okay with that, because it can't be a one-size-fits-all thing, because you can't tell everyone talk about all the things you're interested in, right? We don't want to hear about the shit Dan Cilio's interested in. I don't really want to hear his sports takes, but I definitely don't want to hear about the other shit that he's interested in. All right. Let's talk a little bit of sports, and then we can end on some personal stuff.
Yeah. By the way, this is like, you caught my ear with your random 30-minute podcast on Substack, because I was looking at Substack as a potential platform moving into the future.
You talked about it. That's what made me want to test it out.
Yeah, I mean that's where people are listening to this, Substack.
That's where people are listening to Substack. Here's the thing.
That's the confusing part too. Like everybody's like, do a podcast. I'm like, yeah, no shit, do a podcast. Like, my mother's even like, well, why you should do a podcast? I'm like, oh, okay. Like,
your mother knows what a podcast is?
Barely, but she at least knows enough to say that's what you should be doing. I'm like, yeah, okay. Like, what am I just gonna?
And here's the thing: I've never
got to be monetized.
I've never taken the second step, which is Substack creates a podcast and then it creates an RSS feed, and I'm supposed to take the RSS feed and upload it to Apple and Spotify and everything, so that people can subscribe where they normally listen to podcasts. And even though I'm publishing on Substack, it's showing up on all the other places, and no one knows the difference of where it's published except the Substack people.
Are you staying in sports media? Have you decided that? Like, that's been 5 months of my life thinking maybe I should just bail on all this sort of stuff and go be a yoga instructor.
So almost assuredly no. But I don't know. Like, I wrote the thing on Substack about how, like, I'm going to go back to school. I want to get a degree in counseling psychology and, potentially go to grad school 4 or 5 years from now and maybe eventually become a therapist, right? That's the goal I'm on. And sports media was so frustrating to me for the reasons that we've talked about. I didn't like being boxed in. I didn't like being told what to do. I didn't like being treated like a off-the-shelf product. I didn't like being treated like I was replaceable, which is a big thing in sports media. You're slightly different because you were on-air talent. Anyone who's not on-air talent in sports media has been told this at one point or another. If you don't like it, there are 10 other people who will take your job for less. And it's
I actually had a boss that did that literally at ESPN, who literally spun around in his chair, turned around to one of those file cabinets, opened the file cabinet up dramatically, pulled out a stack of manila envelopes, slammed it on the table with effect, and said, "These are all resumes for people that will take your job right now for less money than you are making." Yes. I was like, "Oh, that makes you feel great.
Yeah,
thanks so much."
I'm sick and tired of that shit, man. I'm so tired of that shit. I'm turning 40 in 12 days. Hey. I don't need to be fucking 40 years old told that I'm replaceable and there's 100 other people who take my job if I dare have an opinion about anything. I hate that shit. So probably not. What I am doing right now, I keep getting either through referrals or whatever, companies reaching out to me asking if I would come and help them start a podcast or grow their podcast. And I've done a couple of interviews. Most of them just made me laugh. And I think what I'm going to do is try and, this is the thing my wife Rebecca's been trying to push me to do for like 6 years now, is she was like, start a consulting agency so that when these people reach out to you, go, "Hey, we want to start a podcast. Can we hire you?" You say, "Yeah, you can hire me. This is my fee. I will set you up for a month. I'll hire someone who can replace me and then I'll leave." Right? Like the temporary shit. The consulting shit. And
remember the consultants we had at 10?
I was going to say, those clowns didn't fucking know.
Those people were stealing fucking money.
But they were good at stealing money. They were bad at everything else.
I remember one time our show was clicking on so many cylinders. Again, I've never been one that focused hyper like on ratings. It's nice when you get them. Ultimately, like, I don't know, does it matter if you don't? Anyway, I remember we were clicking once, and the consultant came in and he looked at us and he's like, why do you think you're successful?
Yeah.
I was like, well, I'm sure as shit not going to tell you.
Right.
You know, because every bit of advice and deep down, you know why it was?
Why?
Because we did the opposite of what this guy said.
Exactly.
This guy told me not to put Marty and Jordan on the air.
Yep.
100%. Do not put your producers and board ops on the air.
Was it?
So we did the exact fucking opposite, and we, like a meteor, took off.
Was it Cilio's agent? That guy?
Yeah,
I thought it was hilarious. They kept bringing in a consultant.
That's right.
Cilio's
I forgot
agent.
that detail, but yeah, I think it was that guy who was involved with
I was like, you literally convinced the station to hire Cilio.
Yeah.
We should never listen to a word you say again.
Exactly. Yeah. Now that you say that, that's right. 100%. That's who that guy was.
That guy. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about sports.
Yeah, sports takes.
I have a
takes.
I have a short take. I don't want it to turn into a runaway thing that we talk about forever. I have a short take, but I want to kind of build up to it. Were you the one who told me the rumor about the construction company in Mission Valley in the NBA arena? Was that you, or was that someone else?
I don't remember that specifically.
Someone told me that.
I know that like the arena talk between Midway and Mission Valley is something that feels still very relevant in San Diego.
Here's how it was explained to me, and I don't buy this, which is why I feel comfortable saying it into a microphone. Someone told me that the construction company fucked up Snapdragon so bad, which even that part I don't totally agree with, that they went back to the city of San Diego and said, we will build you an NBA arena right next to Snapdragon at no cost to you, to try and make right the mistakes we made with Snapdragon. And someone told me that, and I was like, that is probably billions of dollars. And I don't think that's I know people who worked on the stadium as part of that construction company, not $1 billion company. So I don't buy that at all, but it got me thinking. And this weekend I was thinking a little bit about, would the NFL ever return back to San Diego? And I was trying to look up like attendance figures. Baseball does this great thing where they give you not just attendance numbers, but the percentage of fill.
Right. Capacity.
NFL doesn't do that. They just give you raw numbers. And I wanted to see, is there anyone out there just struggling to get fans that has an old stadium that's going to try and pull but in the back of my head, I was like, if we ever want another team that's not the Padres, but is at that level, and, we're getting an MLS team. Great. And this can be part of this. We should be supporting those teams so much more than is rational, to try and show this is a crazy fan base. We will support your team way past the point that it actually makes sense. And when people stopped showing up to Wave games this year, I was like, I think we've missed this window. We can't prove to anyone anymore that San Diego is diehard fans, and if you bring a team here, they're going to be well supported no matter what. It just doesn't exist anymore, and that's, I think, why we can't get an NBA team unless there's a free fucking arena that I don't know about, and we'll probably never get an NFL team again. And that's even looking past the people nationally don't really view San Diego as anything but the place to vacation outside of LA,
right? Or like our former colleague Scott Kaplan used to say, they sort of view it as like a suburb of Los Angeles. Not my words. Don't hate on me. I don't feel that way at all.
Orange County that way.
But, it's sort of in the shadow of the Lakers and the Clippers now with the new arena. So it's just hard to see an NBA team deciding that it's going to plop down operations here in Mission Valley, even with a free arena.
Yeah.
But, you might end up being that stalking horse. I mean, I think the arena stuff in Mission Valley was real.
The NBA
I just
thing?
don't know. I don't know that the NBA was a tenant, was an anchor tenant for that concept. It was
let's replace the sports arena.
Let's replace sports arena, and also maybe there's a way for us to move San Diego State basketball 2 trolley stops away from the main campus, convert where Viejas Arena is into more student housing, all that sort of stuff, right? And then you could also have other events, and not everybody wants to schlep up to Oceanside with the Intuit Dome. Is that what it's called? Or
yes,
whatever. And not everybody wants to.
That's for the Clippers.
G League, right?
Well, the one in.
I'm sorry. What's the Oceanside one where the Sockers play? I forget what it's called.
It's some sort of credit union.
Yeah, Wayne Partella will hate me for not remembering the branding on it, but I think that concept, I think it was real, because I remember taking a tour of Snapdragon Stadium before it was open, and I sort of half joked that there was some local reporting about the arena moving to Mission Valley and coming out of the Midway district. I was like, so where would that go? And somebody without hesitation was like, oh, we would put it right over there. And it was sort of as a joke. It was meant to be a joke, but it wasn't a joke.
Real quick.
He's like, oh, I can tell you right now that arena's going to go right there. And I was like, oh, like this person now, maybe this person was just super clever and on the fly. He knew how to.
But they didn't think about it. There was no smirk.
He's like, it'd go right there. And like he pointed to an area that is still an open space area right now. And I was like, I think.
I don't think San Diego State wants to move the basketball team off campus.
Well, but that is going to be campus. That is going to be part of campus at some point.
West,
so,
right?
So that is going to be part of campus. And, if it's a trolley to or stop. Listen, I mean, I'm with you 100%, but let's be honest. The San Diego State student section at Viejas Arena is not what it used to be.
This is what I'm saying.
It is not what it used to be. And most people are still driving to go to Viejas Arena. Have you driven to Viejas Arena for a basketball game? Let me tell you.
Yeah, it's a nightmare.
It sucks.
It's a nightmare.
Now, driving to Mission Valley isn't great either.
No.
But that being said, it's probably preferable to driving on campus and wasting your life away on Montezuma Boulevard waiting to get into one of these parking structures.
Yeah.
So, from that standpoint, I think conceptually you can see how that might make a bit of sense. Now, of course, they all deny it, but, it's just doing your due diligence to see it through, and then maybe you host other events there and the like. So, but that area somewhere off the 8 needs an arena. So, yeah. I don't know where it's going to be. It's been a minute since I've been on Kogo, but it's going to be somewhere. And, for me, I was like, well, I don't, people get wrapped up in they didn't campaign. Well, things change.
Yeah.
And, let's just see what it looks like. But
yeah,
I don't know.
No, look, driving to the sports arena is not great either.
No,
it's driving everywhere kind of sucks. That's why I didn't really hate the short-lived Seaport Village idea, because I was like, trolley goes over there. Like,
getting into Midway is, it's hard. Like it's a hard thing to do. I mean, there's a reason why the Sockers aren't there anymore, right? There's a reason why everybody's talking about, how to maximize that space. And, Scott Lewis and the people at Voice of San Diego have done amazing work on this, saying like it really doesn't make a ton of sense for that place to have an arena at all.
Sports arena,
whether it's the current arena or whether it's the future arena. So I would, again, as somebody who definitely was not on the winning side of the fight for Mission Valley back in the day, if they said and figured out a way to put an arena there, you're not going to find me, stomping my feet and saying, well, these guys, they didn't campaign on that, and this was bait and switch. Hey, whatever. How is my life going to be impacted? What do I care?
San Diego needs a new arena no matter what.
Yeah.
Sports arena is embarrassing.
And if there's room for it in Mission Valley and, people know how to get there, and even if it's a bit of a hassle to get in and out of that place and Friars Road still sucks, maybe it makes a bit of sense.
Build a bridge across the river.
They are doing that. I think that just got greenlit.
Fuck yeah.
Jack Cronin and I do like 1 million shows on that bridge across the river. So
speaking of, not Jack Cronin, but doing 1 million shows. So you said, I think it was before I pressed record, that every sports radio station in town is talking about
Roki Sasaki.
Roki Sasaki.
This is all you would talk about if you were on Padres Hot Tub.
It is. But you know what? I would, after like 2 episodes, I'd be screaming at Craig going, why are we wasting our time and energy on this? Like, I'm going to tell you a story. So like a year and a half ago, I had a lump on my shin that I thought came out of nowhere. And I was like, oh, there's a little lump on my shin. That's weird. And then a few days later, it got a little bigger. And a few days later, it got a little bigger. It didn't hurt, but it was getting bigger. And I was like, is it cancer? Is it a cyst? What the fuck is it? So I go to see a doctor. I saw my doctor, and he was like, yeah, that's worrisome. You should go see who's the cancer people? Cancer doctor.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say vascular.
I
spent the last 30 seconds thinking of the word vascular.
My brain's reaching for optometrist, which is eyes. So he's like, you should go see a cancer person, have them, CAT scan, MRI, whatever. They'll come up with something. And I went to set the appointment, and it was, I guess it was almost exactly a year ago, a little bit more. It was like December 12th. And I went to set the appointment, and the person was like, hey, if you have already, or he was like, hey, you haven't hit your deductible for the year yet. So he's like, book it for January, and that way you'll do it in January, and you'll clear out your whole deductible for next year. And I was like, cool. And he's like, call back in like 3 weeks. We'll set the appointment. I was like, cool. By the time I called back, the thing shrunk. And it was almost gone. I was like, okay, cool. Not cancer. I don't need to worry about it. But the whole time I was going through that, my wife was like, oh my God, worrying that I had cancer. I was going to die. My mom's calling me every day. I'm crying. I'm worried about you. And I kept saying the same thing to both of them. If I have cancer, there's going to be plenty of time to freak out about it then. Why do I need to freak out about it now if there's a decent chance it's not going to be cancer? Why do I need to care about Roki Sasaki if there's a really good chance that he's not going to be a San Diego Padre? Why do I need to wind myself up thinking about what their starting rotation looks like once they add? It's a waste of fucking time, isn't it?
Have you ever tried to fill 3 and 4 hours of radio?
No, thankfully.
So, again, another slight critique of the industry is like it's less about doing shows and more about filling segments. But that's probably better to expand on that somewhere down the road. I think because he's cheap. He slots in very financially feasibly.
We did this with Ohtani.
Right.
We spent a whole offseason. Oh, if he comes to the Padres, it'll be so cheap. It'll be amazing. And he would have been.
And they did a ton of work on Ohtani, too. Like, every department in Petco Park was involved in that process. That wasn't just AJ probably learning how to say a few sentences in Japanese. I know people that work in other departments there that were asked to spend many, many late nights at Petco Park in video board
and that
production.
Was the right thing to do.
And, they wanted to do all that stuff. Jersey, like they wanted to make sure that they were super thorough throughout the process.
They should do that.
I presume they're doing that with Roki Sasaki.
They should do that. I just don't know why I think need to worry about it.
I think part of it though is and if I were on radio, I'd probably be wondering aloud how exactly the Padres of the last couple of seasons are really advancing the legacy of Peter Seidler when you're just seemingly slashing so much money.
That frustrates me.
That takes a long, there's a lot of people who are saying a lot of things, and I think a lot of reporters who are just sort of repeating things that they're hearing by people who don't want to be on the record, by the way, about advancing Peter Seidler's legacy, and this was always going to happen, and they were always going to take down the payroll, and blah, 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 blah.
Bullshit.
I know people who work there who will tell you that that's not exactly their understanding of the situation.
I got yelled at Blue Sky for having this opinion.
There are some people that I know there that will tell you that that is not exactly the way they understood the way the last couple of years were going to unfold.
Same.
But obviously Peter can't speak. So, that's that said, where they are, I think most people have sort of wrapped their minds around the idea that payroll is still likely to come down, and bringing this guy in might free you up with some flexibility to move somebody else. And, so I think there's a little bit of a domino effect to the point where the Padres, at least as of the time of us recording here on January 6th, have done nothing. They've done absolutely nothing. And nobody seems to know exactly what it is as they hibernate throughout the winter, what it is that they're going to do, because, they might be reliant on trying to get this pitcher at his price point, because then it could allow them the freedom and flexibility to do other things. Right. So I think the way, you described it as sports media is twisting itself into knots to figure out new and different ways to talk about Roki Sasaki. But it's because you're almost at a standstill here waiting for something to happen. Right. While you're watching Corbin Burns go to the Diamondbacks, and you're watching Teoscar Hernandez return to the Dodgers.
Yeah.
And you're seeing Blake Snell sign, so it's like, holy shit, man. Like we are, we're falling behind. But I do think, that a lot of the, a lot of whatever decisions are going to be made somewhere down the road are probably dependent on whether or not the Padres get this player.
That's fair. That's a good argument.
Takes, man.
Yeah.
I've been off for 5 months. I still got a decent take every once in a while.
I had a question here. It might be an unanswerable question, but you would know better than me. So the Chicago Bulls announced that they are retiring Derrick Rose's jersey. Derrick Rose had 3 good years with Chicago.
Won an MVP.
Youngest MVP in league history. And he's from Chicago, so hometown boy. But they never won a title. They never came close to winning a title. He's got, if he has a ring, I don't think he has a ring.
I don't think he does.
So no rings, especially not in Chicago. Won an MVP, youngest MVP ever. Was there for, I think, like 3 good years, and then his knee blew up, and there was that whole thing, and Chicago turned against him at one point. Why aren't you playing? We know you're healthy. It's a mental. Can you think of a comparable player in San Diego that locally is now, because Derrick Rose is now locally beloved in Chicago, like as much as Michael Jordan beloved in Chicago or close. Can you name a player in San Diego that is beloved by locals? Doesn't necessarily have to be a local, but beloved by locals, even though they were not here that long. That would be worth like retiring their jersey.
Oof.
Ted Williams.
The dynamic.
He wasn't good here.
Played for the PCL Padres.
Yeah, it doesn't really count.
I don't know that that's something. You know what's interesting about that? That feels like a very Memphis Grizzlies type thing to do.
It does feel like a very
some
Memphis.
Team with no history that's trying to create a little bit of history.
It's weird
when you're
Michael
the team
Jordan's
of the
team.
Michael Jordan
Yes.
Bulls. It seems like an impossibly high bar to clear to retire anybody's jersey number
outside of like him and Jordan and Pippen, right?
Yeah,
yeah. I would retire Dennis Rodman's jersey
Same.
before I retire Derrick Rose's jersey.
Steve Kerr's jersey, right? Like,
Yeah.
it seems like it's one of those bars to clear that's impossible. Is there anybody here locally?
Like you know what it is? I know what it is. It's the fucking Steve Garvey thing.
Yeah.
It's the Steve Garvey retirement, except Steve Garvey was a Dodger and not a Padre.
Except I don't know that Garvey was ever universally beloved. I wasn't here at the time, but I know plenty of people who will still tell you that there were plenty of bumper stickers that were on the backs of vehicles when Garvey was here in the 80s that said, Steve Garvey is not my Padre. Now, that was a little double entendre about him being a Dodger, and also because,
become a
he was known to, to get around a little bit.
Yeah.
Was a ladies' man and had some kids out there.
Yeah.
So,
not my Padre.
He's not, Steve Garvey's not my Padre. So, again, it was clever double entendre. If anybody has one of those bumper stickers, I'd love one. Off the top of my head, I think about guys who are from here, tied to. I mean,
there's not a lot of them.
If there was a basketball team, would you say Bill Walton? Posthumously.
He played, yeah. But there is no Adrian Gonzalez for the Padres. That would be the comp.
Yeah, I've always liked Adrian. I never really understood the hate that people had for Adrian. They couldn't afford him. Like, they could not pay him. It was insulting how much money they put in front of him, saying, "Listen, these are the limits to what we can spend on you." They told him they could spend $30 million on him. The Red Sox gave him 180.
Within like 5 years of each other, they had, we can't pay Adrian Gonzalez, so we're going to trade him away. Granted, the trade didn't really work out.
Yeah, the Jeff Morad era.
And like 5 years earlier was we signed PV to a contract that we know we can't afford.
Yeah.
So we'll take a shit offer because it gets the money off our books, which honestly.
And PV's in the Hall of Fame. He's in the Padre Hall of Fame at least. So, I don't know that his number's retired. But he's in the Padre Hall of Fame. I don't know that the Padres do that anymore. Manny will probably be the next guy to get his number retired, I would think. But that's just so many years down the road.
Right.
So many things can change between now and then.
That's a decade from now at least.
Yeah, I mean, top of my head, not a Derrick Rose type figure. At least not in the time that I've been doing this. I thought Adrian went through my mind, but
Giles?
No way. Too much baggage there.
Way too much baggage.
Plus I don't know that he was.
Here we go.
I don't know that he was a great player. I mean, he was probably the Padres' best player,
Ken
but
Caminiti.
Again, Padre Hall of Famer, but like a retired number, I wouldn't think so.
Retired number is such a big deal.
I wouldn't think so. Yeah, I don't think of, and I'm just thinking baseball wise. Maybe you have to. I mean, does San Diego State basketball come into play here? I'm not sure.
No, because they already have short windows, right? Like, you can't be at San Diego State for 15 years.
But like you said, I mean, Rose was, we are talking about relatively short periods of time. I mean, Kevin Durant's number got retired by Texas. He played one season there, which is kind of bonkers when you think about it.
To be fair, this is the best season Texas basketball ever had.
What are you talking about? They got bounced in the first round of the NCAA tournament. I mean, she wasn't a champion there.
No, but they were, I guess the LaMarcus Aldridge years were maybe better. Yeah. Marcus Aldridge and TJ Ford.
I don't know. I've got pretty high standards for that stuff, but a lot of this stuff is transactional anyway.
Yeah, I
know you agree to donate X amount of dollars. And,
I never thought Texas was a basketball school, and then they got Durant, and I was like, that's not going to work. And then in my head, what do you think of when someone says Kevin Durant at Texas? You think of him standing in front of a cheering crowd after hitting a game-winning shot, and there's a full crowd going nuts, and it's like, how did they get people in Austin, Texas to go nuts for basketball at that point?
Yeah.
And Kevin Durant, he did.
Yeah, I mean, you can do it on a college level. I mean, I don't have any Padres that come to mind, though, of anybody. But again, I have a pretty high standard for that stuff. I just don't think you should, when I saw the Derrick Rose, I was like, really? Well,
Rashad Penny.
Penny, yeah. Rashad Penny?
Rashad Penny.
I mean, if you're going to go Rashad Penny, why wouldn't you go with Humphrey, right? The guy that actually broke the record. No, the guy before him.
Yeah. Okay, before him.
And I think he's in the Hall of Fame. I don't know that his number is or isn't retired, though. I don't know that San Diego State does that.
I don't think they have any retired numbers, nor should they, really. Probably.
Maybe they do. I don't know. Maybe they. I'm not sure.
All right. Almost wrapping up here, but I haven't seen you since before Christmas. How was your Christmas? How was your New Year's?
Mostly good. It was a bit different. My mother didn't want to travel this year, so
did you do Christmas alone?
Unfortunately.
Did you call her?
I did 3 times. So that was a bit of a a letdown. But my wife's parents came out. Love my in-laws. And
your first Christmas without being with your mom in your life?
I don't think in my life. My wife and I were talking about this. I think it's the first time since we've been together 17 years that we haven't seen my mother around Christmas.
Oof.
So she's getting older. She doesn't want to travel. I think we just presume that we were gonna host like we host all the time. We've got a house that is suitable for hosting, and we enjoy doing it. And she just wasn't up for the travel this year, so that took a little bit of the away from it. But that's not a reflection on my in-laws. We did the best we could this year. My dad's his 2024 was terrible. He essentially has been in either a hospital or assisted living since January of 24. So the idea of him being by himself was something that weighed on me a little bit. But he's in a good space today, and that's what matters most. And so that was I was glad to see 2024 go. But
what'd you do for New Year's?
New Year's, we just had a couple friends over.
Nice.
Just my wife, she's in the wine business, and if you're in the wine business by extension, you're in the food business. So we had some people who are very prominent in the local restaurant space come over.
This is the results of our cheesecake text messages on the day before.
And she was able to secure some caviar, and we just ordered sushi, and we didn't cook. We gave ourselves a break where we didn't cook this year, so we just had like a huge sushi platter that we went and picked up. Shout out to Psycho Sushi in Coronado. And just had...
It's a long drive for you guys, isn't it? Oh, no, because you can just go up the Strand.
Yeah. So we had a couple of couples come over, and 2 of our friends were in town who live in Norway. So, they were almost ready to go to bed by about 10:30. And then we had another couple who lives here locally, and he's the owner of a very great restaurant in town. And we had fun, we just sort of sat and bullshitted and listened to a little bit of music and ate a little bit of food.
Nice.
And, 12:30, 1 o'clock came around, and see you later. It was very chill. How about you?
Very chill. We have been doing Christmas, just the 3 of us, for the last few years, except for last year. Last year was my daughter's first year in school, not preschool, whatever. And like preschool goes year round, right? Like during the summer, they'll kind of chill out on teaching, but they're always going to be there. You can drop your kid off in the morning, pick them up in the evening. Last year, my kid was in kindergarten, and so school just shuts down for 3 weeks. And so we were like, fuck, we need childcare. We both have full-time jobs. And so my mom came out for 3 weeks. And, we have a rule of thumb. We tell everyone, like, you can stay for 3 nights. After that, you should probably go somewhere else. But we were like, my mom's helping us with the childcare, and she stayed for 3 weeks. And it was way too long. And we didn't get into any fights or anything, but it just got a little awkward at the end. You run out of stuff to talk about. Yeah. So this year, since I got laid off at the beginning of December, we were kind of trying to figure out, can we do it ourselves without... I'm waving at a bug, not at a person. We were trying to figure out, like, can we do this without having someone out so we can do Christmas just the 3 of us? And then I got laid off, and it was like, oh, okay, your childcare. Boom, done. So I've been doing a lot of childcare. Christmas was nice because my wife's really busy in December, but it all kind of like stops like Christmas Eve. So it was like kind of like she came back to the family, and 3 of us got to spend Christmas together doing our thing, drinking, watching sports, cooking, all of that. For New Year's, Rebecca's birthday is New Year's Day. So we celebrate New Year's Eve and the countdown to her birthday. So I went and I got her favorite cupcakes, bottle of champagne. We always do a really big charcuterie spread New Year's Eve, and then we just kind of like snack on it until midnight. So we did all that. It was good. It was chill. There was nothing bad about it. This last weekend, we had been planning, my daughter is recently obsessed with trains. I also love trains and public transportation. And so
I was just on a train over the weekend.
So was I.
Very exciting.
So I told her that I would take her on a train ride. And when I told my wife, like, hey, I'm going to take her on a train ride, she was like, well, I want to go on a train ride with you guys. And it turned into a much bigger thing. She had planned this whole weekend. We were going to go to LA. At one point, the train was not a part of it anymore because we wanted to do too much stuff. So on Saturday, we were supposed to drive up to Glendale, go to the Griffith Observatory, drive to Santa Monica, have dinner with some friends. Sunday, we were going to go to the Getty, which is kind of by Santa Monica, and then drive home. Dropped off the dog in Oceanside at her, boarding facility, whatever. Get 2 minutes from the boarding facility, front left tire just goes flat like that. And I'm like, oh, shit. So there's a gas station right there. I fill up the tire. I'm like, I can drive, 2 minutes and this is going to be empty again. So luckily we found a tire shop 2 minutes away. We bring it in and we're like, we'll get this patched up. We'll be on our way. No, we need 4 new tires.
Of course you do.
They were all dangerously worn. And we were trying to do a trip because I'm laid off. We were trying to do a trip for less money. And by the time we paid for the 4 tires, it was the price of what we would have paid for the trip. And so we're like, well, we can't pay this twice. That'd be silly. So canceled dinner, canceled the hotel reservation, which was shocking. They let us do that. No penalty, no nothing. And so we came home on Saturday. We were kind of bummed. We just laid around. We chilled, whatever. And I came up with this idea yesterday morning. I was like, let's still try and make it a fun weekend. Let's jump on a train like we were originally planning on doing. So we went to Oceanside. We jumped on a train. We took the train to the San Clemente Pier. Walked up and down the pier. Walked into San Clemente. Went to a brewery. Had some lunch. Went to a wine shop across the street. Had a glass of wine. Came back down, got on the train, came back. Really lovely, wonderful day, except for the fact that the whole fucking day, you have no siblings, right?
No siblings. 2 only children.
I have an only child daughter, but I have a half brother and a half sister. Spent the whole day with my half sister, like picking up ferociously where we left off on a fight 25 years ago. And like this relationship might be toast. I might never talk to my sister again after all the things we texted back and forth. And so like I'm trying to have a really nice day with my family. We're having lunch. We're walking the pier, and I'm just getting these text messages from my sister that are like just out of pocket and just the type of I was showing it to my wife, and she just kept going, she's saying shit that she can never take back. I hope she knows that. And I was like, yeah, I know. And so it just ruined the whole weekend. It was supposed to be this fun LA weekend. We were going to play tourist, and it was like, no, we had to spend the money to get the tires. And then the San Clemente trip was kind of soured by the fucking thing with my sister. And it just ended up being a not very fun weekend. But this was a fun Monday.
I think the family stuff for me is like, there's always a sense of relief at the end of it if it goes well.
Yeah.
Because there have been years where it didn't go well.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, okay, we all just melted down there. So I think some of that is, my in-laws were here for 9 days, and again, for the most part, everything was good. There was one day where we were talking about seeing some of their relatives we were trying to find a common area. They live up in Los Angeles, and Dana Point was the.
I thought you were gonna say you were in San Clemente.
Well, that was what I proposed.
Hey.
So then I just excused myself from it altogether.
Yeah.
So I said, yeah, I'm gonna stay back and clean the house, but I think there's 2 parts of it. As I've realized this year, not being around either one of my parents, it's like they're getting older, and, it's just not going to, you realize, we're dealing with a increasingly finite amount of time, right? Like it feels more finite by the day. But, there is that sense of relief at the end of it that there is no major blow up. Like there is no, major sort of situation where, you don't remember, that dynamic for that kind of interaction.
Well, this is I've been hammering this into the heads around me lately, which is like no one seems to understand when they're doing the grass is always greener thing, but they're always doing it. It's like Rebecca and I, when we got married, we're like, if I invite my dad, then we have to invite her dad, which means we have to invite her mom, and her dad don't get along, and now it's a mess, right? So we had a wedding where we just decided no family. It was just us and our friends on a beach, right? It was like 20 of us. And when we tell people that, they're like, wow, I wish I could have done my wedding with no family and just my friends. And I'm like, yeah, but the flip side of that coin is like you have kids, and when you want to go out for a night, you drop the kids off at your parents' house. Yeah. We don't have that shit.
Right.
Because our parents live on the other side of the country and we have complicated relationships with them. It's the grass is always greener thing. And this has been happening with Christmas, too. People are like, what'd you do for Christmas? Oh, it's just the 3 of us. We opened presents, we cooked, we drank, we watched sports, we, we had a good time, but it was really low key. Oh, I wish I could do that. I have to get together with my family and there's 15 people in the house and it's chaos, is blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, but to someone who doesn't have that and like kind of wants that sometimes, like you're just seeing the parts of it that aren't yours and going, oh, that sounds so nice compared to mine. And I'm looking at yours going, that sounds so nice compared to mine. And we could both be right. But like the problem is that people do that to the point, and Instagram is my biggest foe. People look at Instagram and they go, I wish I was that. And now I'm going to be sad that I'm not. And I'm like, you don't have, like, it's sure, it looks nice over there because it's different than what you have. You don't need to be sad about what you have just because you don't have that thing. They got problems too. And so.
Yeah, nobody's posting on Instagram you at the tire shop.
Right.
Saying, oh, four new ones? Really?
Right.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's not exactly the thing that people look at and be like, oh. Yeah, like boy, doesn't that look like an amazing? Nobody ever sees that stuff.
And I'll tell you what my sister was mad about. We can laugh about this and we can get out of this. So after I got laid off, me and my sister and my brother, we're far too old to buy gifts for each other. That's ridiculous. But we started a thing a few years ago where my brother has one kid, my sister has one kid, and I have one kid. So we just started buying gifts for each other's kids, right? We have Amazon wish lists here, and when I got laid off, I told my brother and sister, like, hey, I just got laid off. We're trying to pinch pennies. Like, is it cool if we just do like cards this year? And I'm going to have my daughter like draw cards, custom make up, but I'm not going to like spend money. Is that okay? And my brother was like, yeah, sure. My sister's like, yeah, that's cool. But I already bought a gift for your daughter, so I'm going to send it anyway. I was like, that's fine as long as you're cool with everything. Cool. So fast forward 2 weeks. We have a friend that was performing at the San Diego Symphony at like a Christmas show, and she gave us free passes. So we went, enjoyed the symphony. We walk out. It's like 6:00. We're fucking starving. And home is, as you said, like almost an hour away, right? Like 30, 40 minutes away. So we went to a nearby restaurant, got dinner, went home, posted a picture of the dinner on Instagram. My sister started all of her text messages with, oh, so you have money to go out to dinner, but you don't have money for your nephew's Christmas present. And I'm like, why do we do this?
I don't know.
Why do we post a shit to Instagram just for other people to judge us and get angry about it? And I'm like, look, my family was starving. We were 40 minutes from home. I have a whiny child who already sat through a symphony performance at 6 years old. Like I wanted to give her a burger and fries. It wasn't that expensive. And then it just turned into a whole thing. But it's like,
you still got to eat.
People care about what other people are doing far too much.
Far too much. I mean, and I feel like my mother's been a bit guilty of that as well. There's like when we got engaged in Florence, and I didn't tell anybody. The only people that I told ahead of the trip, I didn't even tell the people that we were traveling with, like, hey, I'm going to propose to Leah on this trip. I did tell my mother, and I told two of our friends who I like literally on the airplane. I texted a picture of the ring for the bathroom.
You told me. No,
I don't think I did. Did I?
Maybe I did. I think you told me you were planning on.
There were very few people that knew, and I will say, like, I didn't even know what the plan was. So anyway, we get to Florence, and I propose, and of course, my wife, one of the first phone calls she makes is to who? To her mother.
Sure.
She and her mother are very tight. And I'm not saying anybody is wrong here,
right?
But it sort of speaks tangentially to this, and her mother went on the Facebook and posted it.
Oh no.
And people in my family found out that way rather than us being able to, and like, I swear I told very, very few people. So nobody really was being left out of the loop purposefully.
Yeah.
But her mother, understandably excited, maybe not understanding all the consequences of social media.
Of course, yeah.
Was a very happy mother.
Proud.
Decided that she was going to post this. Somebody on my side of the family then saw it and shared it with my dad. And then, that I didn't call my dad immediately the next day or the next couple of days. Then that became some sort of weird. And I remember thinking the same thing. I was like, listen, there's a lot of good things that come from being out there and being on social media. But when people start using that as and you're like, through no real fault of your own, you got to feed your child.
Yeah.
Like I if I had known, I would have maybe said, let's keep this, let us make the announcement around.
Right.
I understood, like, she was excited, it's their daughter, they got engaged. So it's just like sometimes you do say, man, grass is greener, right? Like,
yeah.
If I didn't have any of this stuff, would my life be better?
This is relevant to the book you just gave me. My buddy Adam who at the time was the executive producer of the Jim Rome Show, which, if you are unaware, is an extensive and grueling job. And he was doing that job, came down, we went to a Padres game. We bumped into a mutual friend who happened to be there. It was like, hey, you guys are here too? Let's go grab a drink. And we're grabbing a drink at the rooftop bar that you can kind of look down at Petco. And we're up there, and Adam mentioned something about his baby boy. And the mutual friend is like, you had another kid? And Adam's like, yeah, I got 2 now. And the guy's like, I didn't know about that. You're supposed to post about that on like Facebook and Instagram so that I know about that. And Adam grabbed him by the cheeks and said, I already have a job. I don't need another job informing you of when I procreate. You can figure that shit out on your own if you're a friend of mine. And it was this moment where like everyone just kind of woke up and it's like, oh yeah, people used to call. Be like, hey, by the way, had a kid. Yeah, this is a boy. This is his name. He's happy, healthy. Mom's healthy. See you later. Bye. And he literally just deleted all of his social media. And he was like, people want to know something. They can call me. They can text me. He's like, I'm tired of this shit. He's like, I don't need another job. And social media for a lot of people has become a job, a thing that causes anxiety. You feel responsible for it. It's all that.
Yeah, I mean, that's, especially in unemployment, I've had a lot of people suggesting like you're not posting enough or you're doing too many Instagram stories. You should be doing more reels and you should be doing more posts. I'm like, okay. Like the reach, every time I log onto these fucking stupid apps, I scroll through like I barely even see the things that I've signed up to see.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know. I mean, I get it. It's definitely a vehicle of promotion. Whatever it is moving ahead, I'm going to have to figure out a way to come to terms with it. But I don't know. It seems like it's, at times not exactly what I want to be doing much with my time.
All right. Speaking of your time, I want to wrap up and I want to ask you a question.
All right.
We did this a lot during the pandemic. We stopped doing this. Do you still get your notification of your screen time?
No.
You turned it off?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I suppose it shows up.
You get them on Sundays.
Yeah. I mean, I think I see it every once in a while.
So you get them. You just kind of ignore them.
Yeah.
So last week, I was like, I'm going to spend less time on social media. So I did 2 things. 1, I found a game on my phone that I liked. And 2, I changed all of the colors of all of the apps to black and white. So, which makes it really hard to actually find them. Like I open up, I'm looking for like the blue app for Blue Sky, and I have to be like, wait, where is it? Not what does it look like, where is it? And that process of like taking a second to find it, I'm like, I don't want to open this. Not right now. Like, what am I going to do? Doom scroll? No, I'll go play a game instead. And so it's been really good of diverting my phone attention towards the game. And I really enjoy this stupid little like puzzle game that I'm playing, right? I got a notification yesterday. My screen time for the week was 5 hours and 30 minutes a day.
So almost probably an increase?
Oh, by like 2 hours. Yeah. By like 2 hours. And I was like, all right, I need to find something else that's not in my phone. Yeah. It can't be a game. So now I've pulled the Kindle back out and I'm spending time reading books again. But yeah, man, our time is constantly being sucked away. It's like, remember the whole thing when we were younger, you'd hear about Vegas. So they have the special air that keeps you awake, the carpet
clocks.
No clocks. The carpet keeps you lost and all. That shit is just in your phone now. It's just meant to keep you in the phone, in the app, lost, confused, awake, and desperate, searching for the next high of dopamine. Like there's a whole thing about being addicted to like mini shots of dopamine, and it actually makes it so you can't really accept large shots of dopamine. It's a whole thing.
Well, I just gave John this book. It's called The Chaos Machine.
Yeah.
If you're at all interested in this subject, read The Chaos Machine because it's all about how the algorithms provide that and the lengths that they go through. And this is, I think, pre-Elon X Twitter. So like this is a lot about YouTube and Facebook and some of how they operate so that they do keep you engaged, which I don't think is a big secret. No, but like once you start reading about how, once you start reading like the lengths that they go through and how like the investigations have gone into the actual algorithmic behavior of the social media companies, I mean, it's just more information for you. Do with it what you will.
Yeah. We said we didn't want to go over an hour. We went well over an hour.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this an hour and 14 minutes in, and you find yourself on Blue Sky, Instagram, whatever, send us a tweet, post?
I'm at D Smith Show across the board. So I mean, I still have my X account. I just took it off my phone.
I deleted it.
I took it off almost like 2 or 3 days after. I had to like get through all the legal stuff, and then I took it off. I just, when you're in the business, you sort of need it. It still is. Even though that algorithm's all messed up too.
But you can follow, like, I used to have push notifications every time like Woj would tweet, because that was all news that was relevant to me. It's one thing I actually kind of miss from Blue Sky, but also I'm like, it's kind of nice not to get the push notifications 20 times a day.
Yeah, so I mean, I haven't been on it much.
I was happy when I could get rid of it.
That's one of the things when I think about getting back into the business. I think like, how much are you willing to do? Because everybody you talk to says, like, if you're going to get in, let's say to start a podcast or start a YouTube show, right? Everybody's on like, oh, you should start a YouTube show and sit there and look at the camera. And, like, I don't know. I've never really done that. Yeah. So it doesn't sound too appealing to me, but I understand why everybody suggests it.
Well, if we get
and like, I'm always like, oh man, what am I willing to do to promote this thing if I end up flying solo in the future? I'm not sure. That's why I said maybe I'll just go be a yoga instructor.
Yeah,
sounds like a great life.
I had one of my buddies I work with at Yahoo Sports always said, I don't know, man, if they ever let go of me, I'm just gonna go become a librarian. I was like, what a cool like backup plan, yoga instructor.
Yeah.
My thing was always I was gonna go be a mailman. I interviewed to be a mailman, got offered a position as a mailman the day that Yahoo like called and was like, hey, do you want to do an interview for this podcast producer role? And I was like, sure. I was this close to being a mailman.
You can listen to all the podcasts you want. Some of our longest listeners were postal workers, were mailmen,
UPS
were people
drivers.
that would drive around or walk around. Yeah. I mean, what a great gig it sounds like, right? You get to walk around San Diego.
Outside.
You're outside.
Lots of sunshine.
Dude's always wearing shorts. They always have great tans.
I'm
sure, around the holidays, it's got its challenges and a handful of days where it's right.
Yeah.
They listen to things and they're interactive. I mean, we had a lot of people who did that.
The only reason I didn't go with that. So for the first, it was this weird system where like for the first 2 years, you don't set the days you work or your hours, and they can work you up to 80 hours a week without question. It's like after those 2 years, you can set your days, you can cap your hours at like 40 or whatever. But it's basically like for 2 years, you're in hell. And it's like, you survive that hell, you'll be fine. And I was like, I got a baby. My wife works really hard. I don't know if it's the time. And that's why I ended up at Yahoo. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's, listen, I mean, I'm, it's a new year. And like I said, I mean, you and like the whole Substack stuff, thinking about getting back in and seeing, where it is on the calendar with MLS around the corner and spring training, a little bit more than a month away. I mean, San Diego State basketball heading into...
When does MLS start? Pretty soon, right?
Well,
February?
Players show up January 11th, which is like 5 days away, and they have 15 players, I think, under contract. So, they're going to have a lot of work to do here quickly. I think their first home match is March 1st.
You going?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I put my dick on the table for MLS a million years ago.
Yep.
So I mean, it'd be kind of weird to not be there. This isn't exactly how, I envisioned it.
Yep.
But that's probably a bit self-serving on my behalf to feel like I, always envision it with me being involved in some capacity. But, it doesn't mean like, I don't want that to sound like me being, oh, well, you shouldn't enjoy this because I'm not. It's not what I'm saying, and who knows?
Yeah.
But I just always thought, when it did get here, I thought it would. I don't know. I always just had this idea in my mind that I really wanted to be, at the forefront of bringing Major League Soccer. Yeah, like that was something that I felt like we had cornered the market on a million years ago. But
I think you had.
I'm happy for it. I mean, I do. I see the enthusiasm from a lot of people out there. We'll see what it looks like.
Yeah. All right. So next week at your place.
Sure.
True Detective podcast.
Yeah, love it.
Catch up. See you next week.
Looking in the but the lights